Welcome back. Now, if you're someone who, constantly wakes up feeling a bit dizzy, maybe foggy, or just plain tired, even after what feels like a full night's sleep, and you've already ruled out the usual suspects like coffee or basic health stuff, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Mm-hmm.
We've been given this really radical and honestly quite startling stack of source material today. It challenges something really fundamental about modern living.
It really does.
We're digging into a concept the author calls the breathable room.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source material kicks off with a pretty provocative question. Have you ever stopped to doubt if the space you live in, like your home, truly lets you breathe freely?
And they don't mean dusty or smelly air.
Exactly, not about that. It's about the fundamental, actual presence of enough life-giving oxygen. Is it sufficient?
That's the core of it.
So our mission today is to explore this, well, frankly, shocking claim from the source that most modern homes, especially those sealed-up bedrooms and studies where we spend hours, are unintentionally functioning as what they term slow-death warehouses of chronic hypoxia.
It's strong language.
It is, and again, this is purely about the oxygen presence.
And what's fascinating right from the start is how the source frames the sheer scale of this. They define this breathable room concept very simply. It's a space with sufficient oxygen.
Okay.
The condition of not lacking oxygen, or, as they put it in the original text, too slow.
Not liking oxygen. Simple enough.
Deceptively simple, maybe, because they then elevate this condition, this consistent supply of good oxygen, to what they call the lowest line of civilization.
Wow, lowest line. So like more fundamental than clean water or power.
That's the implication. They argue this isn't just about the usual indoor air quality stuff we talk about, like CO2 levels or VOCs. The sources suggest this specific issue, chronic, invisible oxygen depletion, is the single most common, yet most overlooked, silent killer in our homes.
A silent killer.
An insidious, low-grade lack of what they call the most absolutely indispensable basis of life, oxygen.
Okay, let's get straight into the mechanism then. How are we creating these warehouses? Because it sounds unintentional.
Completely unintentional. It stems from modern desires, really.
Yeah.
We value privacy, quiet, climate control.
Sure, peace and quiet, temperature stability.
Exactly. So we shut doors, we seal windows tightly, especially in bedrooms, offices, maybe a sound room for a recording like this. We want that perfect controlled bubble.
Makes sense.
But according to the source material, in creating that perfect seal, we're unwittingly depleting the available oxygen way faster than we think.
Faster than we realize.
And crucially, they emphasize it's dynamic. It's not a static problem. Every single breath you take, every process your body runs, uses oxygen and releases waste products.
Okay, so it's constantly getting worse in a sealed space.
Precisely. And the source uses some really striking, almost graphic language here. They describe this buildup, the accumulated toxins and our own exhalations in sealed rooms as electronic sewage, or UD in the original.
Electronic sewage, wow. That paints a picture.
It does, doesn't it? It suggests that if you trap that air, you're just constantly recycling the waste from your own body, your tech, everything, and that concentration just climbs and climbs.
You know, we often confuse that feeling of CO2 buildup with this, don't we? Like if CO2 gets high, you feel drowsy, maybe yawn, you feel the need to get up, get fresh air.
That's a really important distinction the sources make.
Yes.
CO2 gives you that immediate warning signal. You feel it.
Right.
Hypoxia, the lack of oxygen itself, is different. It's sneakier. It doesn't necessarily make you feel acutely sleepy right away.
Okay.
It just means your cells, especially your brain cells, are essentially running on a dimmer switch. They're being starved. They can't perform at full capacity.
Running on a dimmer switch. Okay. So what does this low-grade chronic hypoxia actually do to us then? What are the consequences?
Well, the consequences listed in the source material line up almost perfectly with so many common modern complaints. Feeling fatigued, dizzy, weak when you wake up.
Even after 8 hours, yeah.
Reduced immunity, maybe accelerated aging. The core idea is if your oxygen supply is random, or worse, consistently dropping overnight, your body stays perpetually stuck in what they call hypoxia defense mode.
Hypoxia defense mode.
Yeah, instead of switching into crucial repair mode during sleep.
That defense mode insight feels really critical. That's one of the strongest claims here, I think. They're basically saying your body spends all night just fighting to survive, not rebuilding.
That's a great way to put it. Think about it like if your house suddenly had unreliable electricity, you wouldn't start a big renovation project, right?
No, you just try to keep the essential lights on. Survival.
Exactly. The body sees sufficient oxygen as the absolute prerequisite for deep repair work. When oxygen levels are low or uncertain, it prioritizes basic survival functions over things like cellular repair, detoxification, immune system maintenance.
So it just can't flip the switch to that deep restorative state, especially during sleep.
Not properly, no. Yeah. Not if the fundamental fuel isn't guaranteed.
Okay, so if that's the impact on the body generally, we have to ask, what about the brain? What does this low-grade oxygen starvation do to our thinking? The sources get quite specific here, don't they?
They do. Frighteningly specific.
They talk about cognitive damage in adults from chronic lower-level hypoxia, things like frequent headaches, memory getting worse, difficulty concentrating, and even a degradation of conversational ability, like losing that quick wit, that easy recall in conversation.
Yeah, it suggests this weakened oxygen supply is a kind of silent destruction, not just for physical health, but for mental sharpness, for your ability to really engage with the world effectively.
Silent destruction. Okay, and if that's what it does to a fully developed adult brain, what about the most vulnerable? Kids, infants.
That's where the source material gets really structured, almost clinical. They provide this list of potential damage based on specific developmental stages. It's quite detailed.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so for the fetus up to about 1 year old, this is the peak time for brain neural synapse formation, the basic wiring.
Right.
Chronic hypoxia during this period, they allege, can lead to fundamental developmental delays. It could actually reduce intellectual potential from the very start. It's targeting the blueprint.
Wow, that's genuinely terrifying that the air in the nursery could affect the actual blueprint.
It's a heavy claim.
Okay.
Then moving on, for children aged, say, 1 year to 5 years old,
Okay.
developmentally, the focus shifts more to the cerebellum language areas. So insufficient oxygen during this window, they suggest, could potentially cause issues like weak memory, difficulty picking up language, maybe attention disorders later on.
So struggles with learning language, focus,
Yeah.
linked back to oxygen.
Potentially, yes, according to these sources. And then finally, for kids aged 5 years up to school age, the impact zone is claimed to be the prefrontal lobe. That's our executive function center. Decision-making, emotional control, impulse management.
Okay.
And the results listed are things like increased irritability, anxiety, trouble concentrating, leading to significant learning disabilities.
So if a child is acting out, having trouble focusing, the sources are saying, don't just look at diet or screen time. Look at the air they're breathing, especially when sleeping or studying.
That's the implication. Evaluate the fundamental environment.
And this connects directly back to sleep itself, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The author claims that long-term hypoxia actually prevents the body from entering those deep, truly restorative stages of sleep.
So you might sleep for fewer hours.
Right. But the sources are clear that reduction in sleep time isn't some kind of efficiency gain. They call it a physiological deformation.
Deformation. Strong word again.
It means your body physically can't afford to go into that deep shutdown and repair phase if the oxygen needed for those energy-intensive repairs isn't reliably there. It's forced into a shallower, less effective state.
Okay. So we've established the problem, sealing ourselves in, creating this electronic sewage, suffering from chronic hypoxia. The obvious, traditional fix is just open a window, right?
Right. The common sense solution.
But the source material is pretty skeptical about that being enough.
Very skeptical, for a couple of reasons.
Okay, why isn't just opening a window the answer, according to them?
Well, first, the practical issue. Opening a window, even just a crack, lets in external noise.
Right, the very thing people were sealing the room against in the first place. Defeats the purpose of wanting quiet for sleep.
Exactly. You trade one problem for another. But the deeper reason they give is about physics.
Yeah.
About air movement.
Physics.
Yeah. They argue oxygen won't just passively step in and fill a closed room evenly just because you cracked a window. For real, thorough air refreshment, especially in a tightly sealed space, you need a pressure differential. You need what the sources call expansive flow.
Expansive flow, not just a little draft.
Precisely. Cracking a window might give some localized ventilation near the opening, but it won't create that dynamic, continuous flow needed to push out all the stagnant hypoxic air from every corner of the room.
It doesn't actively replace the bad air everywhere?
Not effectively enough, they argue. And this lack of expansive flow, this failure of the simple window solution, leads to what the source dramatically calls the civilization's divide.
Civilization's divide. What do they mean by that?
They literally set up two columns. comparing two states of being. It emphasizes a huge philosophical difference, not just a physical one.
Okay, lay it out for us. What are the two sides?
On one side, you have the modern house, characterized by, and I quote, oxygen supply without fail decreasing every day.
Oof, decreasing every day.
This state leads to chronic hypoxia, constant brain fog, weakened immunity, and a life mode described, chillingly, as preparing for death.
Preparing for death. Just by living in a normal, modern house.
That's the framing. It implies a state of managed decline, conserving a diminishing resource oxygen.
Okay. What's the alternative then? The other side?
The other side is the breathable room. This is characterized by new airflow every second, constant renewal.
New air every second. Dynamic.
Exactly. This dynamic environment, they claim, leads to active repair, cellular renewal, a clear mind, and a completely different life mode, preparing for youth, reincarnation, and breakthrough.
Wow. That's quite the contrast. Preparing for death versus preparing for youth and breakthrough.
It's stark. And so the takeaway is,
Yeah.
the sources frame the ability to actively and silently remove this invisible killer, hypoxia, as the true boundary or marker of civilization.
So we've got clean water, we've got electricity. But if our air is subtly making us weaker, less sharp, are we truly advanced? Is that the point?
That seems to be the core argument, yes. Have we overlooked the most fundamental element in our quest for comfort and quiet?
All right, this is heavy stuff. But if the problem is this fundamental, there has to be a proposed solution, right? They can't just leave us hanging there.
No, they don't. They move from this radical diagnosis to a practical application. The source presents what it calls the most minimalist yet thorough solution. It's called Sleep Little Heaven, or Sleep Little Heaven.
Sleep, little heaven. Okay, what does it do?
It's designed to address the core issues directly. They highlight two key functions. First, active oxygen supplementation. It ensures the quantity of oxygen is always sufficient, overcoming the depletion problem.
Active supplementation, so it's not just filtering, it's adding or ensuring flow.
It's ensuring constant fresh airflow, which inherently maintains oxygen levels. And second, crucially, it also stabilizes indoor humidity.
Humidity. Why is that important here?
They note that air that's too dry or too wet actually puts an extra burden on your respiratory system. So this system aims for that sweet spot, managing both the oxygen quantity and the air's quality in terms of moisture.
Got it. So how does it work? What's the mechanism? You said opening a window isn't enough because of pressure.
Exactly. And this device's mechanism is designed specifically to tackle that pressure differential problem. It's quite clever, actually.
How so?
Instead of passively hoping air comes in, the device actively draws fresh, treated air into the sealed room.
Okay, it pulls air in.
Right. And since the room remains sealed, doors and windows closed, this steady influx of new air creates a slight positive pressure inside the room.
So it pressurizes the room just a tiny bit?
Just enough, and that internal pressure then naturally, gently forces the old, stale hypoxic air, the electronic sewage, to leak out through all those tiny gaps that exist around doors, windows, vents.
So it pushes the bad air out by bringing good air in.
Precisely. It creates this continuous, pressure-driven breathing cycle for the room. It's never static, as they say, a constant, gentle flush.
And they claim this is easy to set up.
That's a major selling point in the source. It reportedly transforms a standard bedroom into a breathable room in just minutes. No need for knocking down walls, no demolition, no complicated piping or ductwork.
Huh. Just place the unit and turn it on, basically.
That's the idea, an environmental overhaul without needing a construction crew.
Okay, it sounds effective based on their physics argument. But I have to push back a bit on something the author claims. They state this technology isn't just like a fancy air purifier. They call it a primitive blueprint of a revelation meant to unlock the space destiny of humanity. That sounds huge. Isn't that a massive leap for what's essentially an air system?
It is a massive claim, no doubt about it. And that's definitely where the author pivots from the technical explanation more towards philosophy.
Right. Space destiny of humanity.
Their argument, as I read it, is that we've fundamentally flawed our living spaces for centuries.
Wow.
We've prioritized insulation, quietness, thermal efficiency, and in doing so, we inadvertently created these environments that are biologically compromising, boxes that starve us of optimal oxygen.
Okay.
So by solving this fundamental hypoxia problem, they believe we aren't just getting, slightly cleaner air. They think we're removing the primary invisible barrier to human potential, to recovery, to longevity.
So the space destiny isn't about outer space, it's about unlocking our internal space, our brain's potential.
That's how I interpret that grand claim, yes. The idea that a fully consistently oxygenated brain is finally operating at its true intended capacity without that low-level drag.
Okay, that reframing makes the grand language a little more understandable, if still very bold. So let's recap the core idea then. According to these sources, oxygen freedom, having constantly sufficient oxygen, is the real fundamental definition of a civilized space, maybe even more crucial than reliable water and power, because it directly governs our internal human potential.
That's the essence of it.
And the author gives a final proof point, right? Something about personal experience.
Yes, a very compelling subjective test. They describe working in a completely sealed sound room, like the kind we might use with this system running for over an hour.
And
Their description was powerful. No breathlessness, no dizziness, no feeling of stuffiness at all. They felt, and I quote, their body and air were synchronized.
body and air synchronized, that makes it feel less theoretical, more tangible, a visceral difference.
Exactly. It shifts the argument from charts and numbers to immediate felt experience. And that visceral potential is really what we want to leave you, the learner, thinking about. If these sources are even partially correct, if our brain function, our mental clarity, maybe even our children's developmental potential are fundamentally tied to the constant active supply of oxygen in our most private spaces,
Yeah.
well, it forces us to really reevaluate what true rest and recovery actually means.
Reevaluate our priorities, maybe.
Perhaps. The sources are implicitly asking us to reconsider the price we might be paying for modern quietness and sealed-in thermal comfort. If our cognitive performance, our very ability to think clearly and repair ourselves, is intrinsically tied to active oxygen flow, are we choosing environmental silence at the cost of our own mental sharpness and long-term health?
That's the provocative question.
It is. So what unexamined areas of your own daily routine, your bedroom, your home office, where you spend hours focused or supposedly resting, might be impacted by this invisible factor, this thing you've likely just taken for granted,
Yeah.
the air itself? Are you living in a warehouse or a truly breathable space?